Have you ever had this happen? Like you're learning all these new English words and you think, okay, I got this, but then like right when you need to use them, they're just gone.
Yeah,
It's like, where'd they go?
totally. Like your brain has this like trap door or something for
Right.
vocabulary.
So frustrating. So today we're going to figure out how to like shut that trap door for good.
Exactly. We are talking about how to make new English words actually stick. And we've been listening to Jennifer and Daniel from the English Leap podcast, and they have so many good tips.
I know. Such good tips. So basically in this deep dive, we're going to equip you with all the tools to turn learning new words from, ooh, this is so hard, to like a super fun adventure. And Jennifer even talked about how she struggled to remember this word inevitable. Like she knew what it meant, something that has to happen that can't be avoided, but she just couldn't think of it when she was speaking.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that.
Right. And like a lot of their tips are in this free PDF, so check that out. It's in their YouTube video description.
Yeah, it's awesome. And we're going to hit the main points from that PDF today.
Okay, so like where do we even begin with this whole making words stick?
Well, Jennifer and Daniel, they really emphasized learning words in context. And this just makes so much sense. So it's like instead of just memorizing lists of words, you encounter a word in a story or a real conversation.
And that makes it so much easier to remember.
Oh, yeah. Way easier. And they talked about this analogy of learning to cook. So it's like imagine trying to learn just by reading a recipe versus like actually watching someone make a dish.
So that's good. Like you need the whole picture.
Right. Like when you actually see how a word is used, how it fits in with other words and ideas, it just gives you so much more than you'd get from a dictionary.
I see, yeah. And I remember they had this example of learning the word serene in a book.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
They were describing this like peaceful lake. So now every time you hear serene, they'll watch you kind of automatically picture that calm lake.
That's exactly it. The context gives you this like anchor for the word. It's not just floating around in your brain. It's connected to this whole image and feeling.
That makes a lot of sense. And that's why like reading books and watching movies in English can be so helpful.
Absolutely. It's all about encountering those words naturally. But then the question is, okay, how do you actually make them stick long term?
Good point. Like you can read something and be like, oh yeah, I get it. But then a few days later, it's gone again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Jennifer and Daniel talk about this thing called spaced repetition.
Spaced repetition. What's that?
So it's all about timing when you review information. So you might see a new word today and then review it tomorrow, then maybe 3 days later, and then a week later, just as you're about to forget it.
Oh, interesting. So it's like giving your memory a little nudge right when it needs it.
Exactly. And the cool thing is there are these apps that can help you do this, like Anki and Quizlet.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of those.
Yeah, they're really popular for language learning, and Jennifer and Daniel use them too.
That's so cool. So like the app reminds you when to review a word?
Yeah, basically. So you don't have to like keep track of everything yourself. And eventually this reviewing just becomes like second nature.
Oh, I like that. So you don't have to think about it as much.
Right. It just becomes part of your routine.
Okay, so we've got context and we've got spaced repetition. What else?
Well, another really good one is to make words personal.
Okay, so what does that mean?
So it's all about connecting a new word to something in your own life, like a specific event or a feeling or even a person you know.
Oh, I like that. So it's not just some random word. It actually means something to you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Jennifer talked about how she learned the word adventurous, and she connected it to this time she traveled solo for the first time.
Oh, wow. So every time she hears that word, she thinks about that trip.
And all the emotions that go with it. Daniel talked about how the word nostalgic always makes him think of looking through old photos.
Oh, that's so sweet.
So these personal connections, they just give a word so much more meaning, and that makes it way more memorable.
I see. So what if you come across a word that's kind of hard to connect to a personal experience?
That's where visualization comes in.
Visualization, so like pictures in your mind.
Exactly. Jennifer and Daniel said that if you can't think of a personal link, just visualize something funny or something really unusual, like the crazier the better.
Oh, okay. Because like weird things are easier to remember.
Yeah, totally. Our brains are just drawn to weird stuff. They use this example for the word gregarious, which means sociable. So to remember it, they said to picture a guy named Greg throwing this huge, crazy party.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Thanks.
Like hundreds of people and loud music.
Exactly. So now you're connecting gregarious to Greg's party in your mind.
That's so clever.
Okay.
Okay, so we've learned the word, we've reviewed it, we've connected it to our lives, we've pictured something crazy.
Yeah.
What else is there?
Well, all of that is great, but the most important thing is to actually use the word.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
You can't just learn it and then never say it. It's like if you learn a new exercise at the gym, but never actually do it, you're not going to get stronger, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like the word needs a workout.
Exactly. So Jennifer was saying how she tries to slip new words into conversations whenever she can, like even just talking to herself.
Oh, yeah, I do that sometimes too. It feels kind of silly, but it helps.
And Daniel said he tries to use at least one new word every day for a whole week. So like in an email or just talking to someone.
Okay, so it's all about making that effort to actually say the word out loud.
Exactly. It just reinforces it in your memory so much more.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of different strategies. What about like memory tricks?
Oh, yeah. Those can be really helpful too, like mnemonics and word
Oh,
associations.
right. I've heard of those.
Yeah, so basically it's about taking a difficult word and turning it into something that's easier to remember. Jennifer's favorite example was for the word ubiquitous, which means everywhere. So she remembers it by thinking ubiquitous like air.
Oh, that's good. Because air is like everywhere.
Exactly. And Daniel had a mnemonic for taciturn, which means quiet. He just pictures a quiet turtle.
Uh-huh. I like that one.
It works because the tat sound is in both words. And also, turtles are quiet. So those might seem kind of silly, but they actually work really well because our brains are wired to remember stories and images.
It's like you're tricking your brain into remembering the word.
Exactly. Okay, now here's another tip that can save you so much time. Learning groups of related words.
Oh, so like words that have the same root.
Right. So like, for example, if you learn the word help, you can then figure out helpful, helpless, helper, and so on.
That's so true. It's like you get a bunch of new words just by learning one root word.
Yeah, and it also helps you to guess the meaning of new words that you haven't seen before. If you recognize the root, you can kind of piece it together.
I like that. So it's like you're becoming a word detective.
Hmm.
Okay, so is there anything else?
Okay, last but not least, make learning fun. Learn vocabulary in areas that you're already interested in.
Oh, that's a good point.
Like Jennifer loves to watch travel shows, so she picks up all these travel-related words without even trying.
Yeah, and if you're into sports, you probably already know tons of sports vocabulary.
It's like you're absorbing the language naturally. It just makes learning so much more enjoyable.
So much less of a chore. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Any final words of wisdom?
I think the biggest takeaway is that learning new vocabulary is not something you do just once. It needs to be part of your routine. It's all about repetition and consistency.
Yeah, like even just a few minutes each day can make a big difference.
Exactly. You know, try doing a word of the day or using those vocabulary apps we talked about. Even just practicing saying the words out loud to yourself.
Anything that helps keep them fresh in your mind.
Oh, and I almost forgot. The original podcast episode had this really cool segment called Vocabulary Spotlight with Charlotte.
Oh yeah, Charlotte. I loved her explanations.
So she went through some of the words that Jennifer and Daniel had talked about and explained them in detail.
Yeah, like with examples and stuff.
Exactly. So I think it would be helpful to just quickly go through some of those words too.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay. So she started with hurdle, which means like a difficulty you have to overcome. And she used the example of how remembering words can feel like a hurdle in learning English.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. What else?
Inevitable, which means certain to happen, like how a storm will inevitably cause flight delays.
Huh? I hate when that happens.
Me too. Okay, so she also talked about pumped, which means like really excited, like when you're pumped for a weekend trip.
Yes, I'm always pumped for the weekend.
And then she talked about frustrating, meaning something that annoys you because it's difficult, like trying to learn to play the guitar without any help.
I would definitely be frustrated.
Right. Okay, then there was struggling, which just means finding something difficult, like struggling with new vocabulary.
Uh-huh. That's what we're talking about right now.
Exactly. Then there was serendipity, which is like when something good happens by chance, like finding your favorite book at a used bookstore.
Oh, I love when that happens.
Me too. Okay. Then there was vanish, which means to disappear really quickly, like when you lose your keys and it seems like they just vanished into thin air.
That is the worst.
I know. And then there was mastered, which means like you have total control over something, like you've mastered the art of baking bread. And then slip away, which means to gradually disappear or be forgotten, like the memory of someone's name.
Oh yeah, that happens to me all the time.
And then there was locked in, which means securely stored in your memory, like when you feel like you finally have a word locked in.
Okay, good one. What else?
spaced repetition, which we already talked about, and second nature, which means something you can do without even thinking about it, like speaking another language fluently.
Yeah, I wish English was second nature to me.
We'll get there. Adventurous, which means willing to take risks,
Mm.
like trying a new type of food.
I love trying new foods.
And nostalgic, which is that feeling of longing for the past, like when you look at old pictures.
Oh yeah, like a warm feeling.
Exactly. And then there was gregarious, which means someone who's really social, like they're always organizing parties.
Sounds like Greg.
Right. And taciturn, which means quiet, like someone who doesn't talk much in a group.
Okay, I'm definitely not taciturn.
Uh-huh. Me neither. And then there was consistency, which means doing something regularly. Like it's important to be consistent with your language learning.
For sure. And lastly, slip it into conversation, which means to just casually use a new word while you're talking.
Yeah. Don't be afraid to try it out.
Wow, thanks for going through all those words. That was super helpful.
No problem. So I think the big takeaway from today is that there are tons of different strategies for learning new English words. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
And the most important thing is to find what works best for you.
And don't forget to make it fun.
Yes, learning should be enjoyable. So here's one last thing to think about. What if you started learning new words specifically in areas that you're already really interested in?
Oh, that's such a good idea.
So like, if you love cooking, you could focus on learning cooking vocabulary. Or if you're a big sports fan, you could learn all about sports terms. What do you think?
I think that's brilliant. It would make learning so much more engaging. And who knows, maybe you could even discover some new passions along the way.
Yeah. Or even like connect with other people who share your interests. So don't be afraid to explore. You never know what you might learn.
Exactly. Keep learning, keep exploring, and have fun.
Bye.
See ya.